Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. At this time, I'm really excited that we're doing a series on women in the finance world. Women in the finance with stories from the past, the present, and their view on the future. So today we have Lauren Harrell. She currently serves as the Head of Commodities for the financial institution group of Chatham Financial, an independent global leader in debt and derivatives advisory. She's a strategic thinker. Her career has, more interesting to hear her tell the story, but she has various degrees and certifications. More than anything, she's a millennial who has been honored with today's Millennial Superstar 40 Under 40 list for Chester County. She's a woman who makes a difference. She holds licenses and certificates, as I said, in various areas. She's also a mom with a 4-year-old daughter, a husband, and is just a really lovely lady to then listen and hear her story of how she's navigated her career in finance. Lauren, welcome.
Ivy, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with you today.
So where did this idea about going into the finance world?
So
where did it come from? Is it, like I was like, what was this a family thing? Was this how did you find out? Where the idea come from?
Well, my father has always been into finance, and I remember on my 18th birthday, he gave me a book on low load and no load mutual funds. Kind of a strange gift.
The average 18th birthday present.
Yes, thanks, Dad. So it's always kind of been in the background, but when I graduated from college from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, I just wrapped a degree in criminal justice, and my cousin in Kansas actually worked for Wells Fargo Financial at the time, and he made a recommendation for me to interview for a job in Spokane, Washington, and that's where I kind of fell into it. And at the time, Wells Fargo Financial was really focused on subprime lending, mainly second mortgages, consolidation loans, things of that nature, and that's where I kind of started my career.
And so as, let's just point of reference, okay? Because I know in some of the great stories you're going to share today, you graduated college at this time was around what time? What year?
It was the end of 2003.
Okay. So you moved to Washington State. I always like to be clear on that. Did you have family? Or is this just like, okay, yeah, here I am, I'm on an adventure. Let's hit the road.
Yes, my parents lived in Spokane, Washington. Had they lived in Paducah, Kentucky, I probably would have ended up there. But I focused my time in Spokane and landed at Wells Fargo, and my career just kind of took off from there. And it was around this time that obviously subprime was very prevalent in the market. And I had moved from Wells Fargo to Countrywide Financial, and that was right around 2005 and 2006. And this is, of course, right at the beginning of the housing crisis. And I had actually met Countrywide Financial CEO Angelo Mazzillo about 3 weeks before the financial crisis really took off in August of 2007. And it was at that time, all of our products were being taken away from us. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac were cutting their lending guidelines. Countrywide drew down their funding lines. And it was at that time I just thought, I really need to figure out where I'm going to steer this ship. I didn't want to remain in the housing market. And so I started this journey on, you mentioned some of my credentials. It was at this time I started my master's program at Gonzaga University, master's in finance. And I decided I wanted to pursue a CPA credential and also a chartered financial analyst credential as well.
So I'm going to chime in here. That really kept your options very broad in finance, from CPA to, what did you say, CFP?
CFA, yes.
CFA, which is Certified Financial Analyst, right?
Chartered Financial Analyst, yes.
Okay. And two different ends of the spectrum, very much in finance. So you realize like, okay, let's figure this out. This is it. This is the way I'm going, but I'm going to keep my options open.
Absolutely. That optionality was really important to me. And I think that accounting and finance, I think of accounting as the taillights of a car and finance as the headlights of a car, very different perspectives.
Oh, I really like that.
So I wanted to be very balanced and again, have the optionality. I think my goal at the time was to be a CFO at some point. And CFOs need both skill sets. You have to be able to speak both languages. And so that optionality appealed to me.
So, right. So a CFO is the person who's forecasting as well as making sure all the numbers and the finance pieces are correct. So it truly is a combination of both those skill sets. That makes enormous sense.
Yes. And at the time, I didn't have enough credits to sit for my CPA license. I remember dedicating just hours upon hours in school. At one point, I was attending 3 schools to get credits to sit for my CPA exam. And I had left Countrywide, thankfully, and ended up at a regional bank doing commercial credit underwriting at the time when commercial real estate started to go down. So I always joke around that a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. And boy, did my career really go through some turbulent seas. It kind of rolled through the financial crisis. And after I left this regional bank, I did end up at a public accounting firm. And it was there that I was able to obtain my CPA license. I did financial statement audits, internal control audits for mainly public and private banks were typically my clients.
So you truly, if you, as your career navigates, you truly are set up to be a CFO.
I think so. I think in the C-suite for sure. I think that's definitely a trajectory that I would like to maintain. And I think having worked in kind of the very detailed tactical areas of financial statements, of credit underwriting, both internal and external to the financial sector, I think I really bring a broad multi-stakeholder mindset to problem solving, to bringing people together to collaborate on solutions. I can speak a lot of different languages because of where I've been in my career.
So speaking of where you've been in your career, and when we were chatting originally, you made mention of mentorship and how important that has been to you.
Absolutely.
Can you share a little bit of why that has been important? You said there's a particular mentor that has stood out, and because I think it's important for all of us. We try to navigate these things. We're like, I got this, and we never really necessarily realize the importance of mentorship, or at least some of us don't.
I think it's critical, and I wish that colleges, universities would focus on this just a little bit more, not just the mentorship aspect, but the networking and relationship building aspect. So one person in particular stood out. I met him at a CFA luncheon. This was in 2009. He was lecturing on fair value accounting, a very esoteric topic. And I came up to him afterwards and started talking with him, and he was really impressed with the questions that I asked. We subsequently connected over lunch, and he said, I just moved into the area and we really like to travel, my wife and I, and we have a dog. We're looking for a dog sitter. And I happen to have a dog sitter for him. And this kicked off what has now been a over 10-year friendship with this gentleman. And we travel together, our families vacation together. And it was about 6 years ago, maybe. He's the one that actually connected me with my current role at Chatham Financial. He had several students that worked for Chatham, and he said, I really love this firm. I think you need to take a look at this firm. I'd like to recommend you in to one of my former students. And I got on the phone with this individual. They were in London at the time. And 6 weeks later, 16 rounds of interviews, a math test, and all of that, I ended up moving across the country. And so this man, Jerry, had a huge impact on my career, but it wasn't until he and I had built this relationship over 5 years that materialized.
And so you talk about the importance of a network and networking, and you even referenced earlier that why are they not teaching this in grad school, or let alone undergrad, and let alone law schools and all your professional programs?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wh-
It's the single best advice that I give to people. If you trace back all of the roles that I've had, I've known individuals or have been referred into these organizations almost every single time. And I think that building those relationships and having people advocate for you is so much better than just sending somebody a resume that doesn't know who you are and doesn't know the value that you bring. And so I think, especially during a time like this, where we're all kind of experiencing something as a collective, reaching out and making sure that you're talking with people and being interested in what they're doing and understanding what their goals are and how you can help them, I think is just so critical to the success of, it's been very critical to the success of my career, without question.
So what do you think has surprised you? What else has surprised you in the role of a woman in finance and for you to building out your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think outside of the networking piece and how critical that's been, I think a couple of things stand out. The first one would be how reactive business tends to be. And maybe this isn't something necessarily finance related, but I think that in placing individuals and leveraging their strengths where they're best, you can take upstream thinkers and place them in a role where you don't necessarily have such reactive responses in business. You have people that could maybe see things coming down the tracks a little bit better and plan better. So business continuity planning, crisis management, things like that. These individuals have an incredible skill set that if you leveraged it maybe a little bit more, you could really serve yourself well in business. I think something else that's really been surprising to me is how few women I've seen in leadership roles. I think that's changing. I hope that's changing. But earlier in my career, I could maybe count on, fewer than 2 or 3 that I had that were very good role models in high level positions. And I do see that trend changing, which is great. I think that now, so more than ever, the conversation around things like women in the boardroom or, huge organizations having professional women's networks inside of them. I do think that trend is changing.
It's interesting because I had the honor and pleasure of speaking at a large global company's women's initiative. And what thrilled me was the 25% of the men I saw show up in the room.
Absolutely.
And that was, and the woman who booked me to speak, I was like, wow. She's like, no, the guys in this company are really like, well, wait a second. If they're all showing up for this, I don't want to miss out. Must be good. And they're showing up for it, a variety of different ways. I know sometimes women's networking groups, guys will say, well, it's a women's networking group. I said, yeah. And, men show up there. They're like, they do? Can I really come? I was like, we've shown up at the guys groups for years,
Absolutely.
Whether they wanted us or not. And if you want to be in the average, or do you want to stand out? And if you're cool on standing out and speaking up and seeing what the pulse is about, because it's the men and women together who will make the change.
Absolutely. No question. And I think having men advocate for women is a very strong message. And I don't think women can do it on their own. It's going to take that partnership, and it's going to take the understanding of the men on the other side to really understand what value women bring to the table. I think we have such an incredible emotional intelligence that, my experience has been women approach problem solving in such a holistic way. We tend to view things through multiple lenses, and I think it rounds out decision making. And I think as a result, it drives better results inside of your business.
And I respect that enormously. What you're saying is how women see decision making, and how we, it goes back when we were talking about this the other day on an interview of like hunters and gatherers, men back in the day, back in the Stone Age, men took the spear, went, straight, killed the buffalo, came home. Women, gathered the babies on their back and the young children and went out into the forest, and they might see a little bit of, some potatoes grown here and some things they could use for herbs over here and something else, another root vegetable there. And they brought it all together. And then they took that meat and they cooked something, and not just for that day, for days. And it kept recreating. And there's a skill set that women have that really bring it forth. That is special.
Absolutely. I think women, my experience has been women tend to be highly collaborative and in gathering, to your point, in the gathering of perspectives. And I just think it brings a much better decision to the table. And I think you've thought through many more aspects of that decision and how it might impact not just your small area of the firm, but another area of the firm that you may not even work in, but now you've at least considered how your one decision might impact those people.
So, as just two women sitting on the line talking, of course, it's being recorded. What do you see for women in the future? And what do you see for the finance industry post of this experience, this global experience that we're going through right now, or have been going through for a while? What do you see for women? What do you see for the finance industry?
I think for women in particular, I see a great ability to continue to move up into leadership roles. I think that once folks realize the depth of decision making that women can bring to the table, I think that's going to continue. So I think that women in leadership roles, women in finance, I do think that's a trend that we're going to see continue. I think that women are, if I'm not mistaken, they're a larger percentage of graduates these days, highly educated, out in the communities. And so I see that as a trend. What I also see as an interesting subset of that is women as breadwinners. And this is something that is on my mind because we are catapulting women. We're talking about women in these roles more, but I haven't seen a whole lot on women as breadwinners and the impact that that has on the family dynamic. It's a bit of a paradigm shift for a lot of individuals. And what does that mean? So I think that's something that I'm keeping an eye on and would love to see blog posts about, books written about, things of that research done in that area. I think for finance in particular, when you're coming out of another side of a crisis, there tends to be a pendulum swing. And the first crisis for the financial crisis was tons of regulation. And we saw that pendulum swing to one direction. We saw it move back a little bit. I think with this crisis in particular, because it's so deep, it's really difficult to say how we're going to be on the other side of this thing. I think that certain regulations could be rolled back. I think you're seeing things like central clearing, things like collateral posting that were designed to really helped credit this time around, but now we're experiencing some liquidity issues as a result. And so I always think about when you push down on one part of a balloon, another part of a balloon kind of expands. And so where finance and money kind of move around and how regulation plays a part of that is just something I always watch when it comes to a crisis. It's unprecedented times, there's no question. And I think that we will learn an awful lot about, to your point earlier in our previous conversation, about technology. I think that is going to play a huge role in finance going forward. Not that it hasn't already, but I think that it's going to be something that will really separate. It'll kind of tease itself out from this crisis in particular.
Yeah, I think, we're really going to see, there's been a technology boom going on for years now. And I think we're going to see the next evolution of it. When on a moment's notice, business so quickly went virtual. And, it was always been the smaller businesses had the ability to go virtual, but big corporations, major global corporations on a moment's notice went virtual. And in that moment started being opportunities for tech to see, gee, we need to fill we could fix this, we can improve this, we can grow on here. And I think that's going to be a huge future here.
Absolutely.
So can we talk, how's working motherhood?
So, well, since we're all virtual now, I shared this story with you before we started, but, having my husband at home, me working at home, my 4-year-old here, doing our best to homeschool, whatever that looks like. And I joked around, yesterday's activity was her cutting her own hair. So I feel like we're doing great. We're doing great.
Right now, science experiments look like cookie baking. And
yeah, we've done that. We've done art projects. We've done walks outside. We've done, building things. She gets kiwi boxes, so she does those types of activities. She colors. And so I think I told you I turned my treadmill into a walking desk. And so at the beginning of this, it looked like me walking on the treadmill, working, and having her sit next to me, reading me a book. I mean, it's just, this is the nature of where we're at.
And this is our new normal, new routines.
It is for the time being, that's for sure. Absolutely.
And I think there'll be an enormous amount we all grow and learn from here.
There's just no question. I think that there are so many silver linings. Being able to disconnect a little bit, spend more time with family. I've been able to cook more. I've been able to read a little bit more. And so I think that it's maybe a good way to reset. We all get really busy, overschedule ourselves. As a woman, sometimes I have a hard time saying no. I don't know if anybody else experiences that, but it's a word I'm not as comfortable using, but I'm getting better. But this is an opportunity to really pull back and reassess what's important.
Back in the day, in my younger years, my husband used to say to me, he goes, Ivy, you can say no. And it took years of experience and practice. And honestly, it took years of counseling other women leaders to help them choose what were their yeses, and shifting the idea of no, of it's not now, not yet, not ready. And I teach that in sales, that when people say no to you, it's not no, it's not yet, not ready, not now. And when we actually shift that same mindset, and we can say, it sounds wonderful, I wish I could, but at this time, not yet, not ready, not now. And truly seeing, so when we're making our strategic decisions, what we're showing up for, we have the ability of showing up at 100%.
Absolutely. No, that's great advice.
So what tips do you have for other young women or other women in the finance world as they're navigating their careers, and what they might be able to think about going forward?
I would say for folks that are interested in finance roles, I would say to think about what area of finance you're really interested in and do your research. I think, something that's been beneficial to me is not only looking at my small area of the world, like oil and gas in particular is kind of where my focus is. It's not just that. There are so many other things. Finance is so interconnected. What impacts that piece, right? So it could be geopolitics, it could be supply, demand, and what goes around those supply demand dynamics. So thinking about particular areas of finance and what impacts those areas. And I would say try to connect with people who are in that area of finance. I remember early on when I was thinking about, well, what do I really want to do with my career? I started reading CFO magazine. And I started looking at the profiles of these individuals, and they all had CPAs, they all had a certain type of background. And so it started to inform the decisions that I made about how I pursued education or credentialing. So sometimes I think looking at people's bios or looking at job descriptions and what they're asking for can really be eye-opening as well, and kind of help guide you to where you may land in the finance world.
I think that is great advice, and there's great insight there. Actually, when you get some thoughts and ideas, maybe I'd like to do this. I'm a firm believer in market research. I tell every one of my clients, when you're thinking about something new, what can you research? Who can you interview? What can you read up on? Do it. Don't think about it. Do it, and then see what information you're getting back and how that sits for you, for your futures.
Absolutely.
Whether it be a future as a businesswoman, a future as a leader of a company, a future as a leader, whether it's your own brand or however that looks.
Absolutely. And I think now, being so far into my career and having a fairly large network that I really do spend a lot of time cultivating and reaching out and building those relationships, I can open up that network and talk to people and say, hey, what are your thoughts on what's going on here? Or what do you know about this role over here? Or what do you know about this part of the market? And so I feel like I've built this incredible, almost advisory board of people that I can really lean on for subject matter expertise. It's just been really invaluable to my career overall.
Well, Lauren, I can't thank you enough for taking some time out of an interesting days we're having these days, and it's a welcome break, and I really appreciate you sharing your insight and your background and what you're up to today, and we look forward to seeing what actually you give your daughter for her 18th birthday present.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me, Ivy. It's been a pleasure.
And listeners, remember to hit the subscribe button underneath this, and we will come into your inbox every Monday morning, as well as leave a comment. What in Lauren's interview today struck you the most? What else do you want to know about? We're here to serve you, so let us know what interests you, and we'll give it to you. See you next time on Her Success Story. Your approval anymore, 'cause I've got mine.